Chapter 9 Worst of Both Worlds. The mischief that I witnessed wasn't meant to be seen. Take me to another world like a green screen. Frank spent a lot of time at his friends' homes in the suburbs. They would invite him over for dinner, and he always went since food was limited at home. The first time he was extended an invitation, he felt like he was being invited to a royal dinner. From the outside looking in, the suburbia kids lived in a perfect home. They had nice-sized houses equipped with both parents, and their bedrooms were filled with everything they could have possibly wanted, like they had a magic genie to grant their every wish. However, since generational poverty was so deeply rooted in him, Frank started to get a glimpse of what life looked like while placed on a silver platter. He got a sneak peek behind the scenes, noticing that his peers kept secrets hidden from their parents. Behind closed doors, his peers in the suburbs were more heavily involved in drugs and alcohol because their parents were rarely home. It caught him off guard because drug abuse was something that didn't exist in his own home, due to the safety net of his mother's security. Frank never allowed his peers to pull him into their illicit drug use. He didn't partake because his passion for providing for his family kept him distracted and disconnected him from the flame his friends were attracted to. He didn't try it, even when temptation was on the tip of his tongue, because he knew he wasn't strong enough to do it without it becoming suicidal. He didn't want to pacify the reality that he had learned to deal with so well. It would have weakened his spirit, causing him to feel sympathetic about himself and become blind to the transparency of his realities. He started to notice when he was invited over for dinner that it was the first time his friend's family communicated with each other the entire day. Even his impression of a perfect home had imperfections. After seeing the lifestyle of his peers who had the hologram of a perfect home, Frank noticed that although he was poor on the outside, he was mentally richer than his peers with parents who were financially free. Mother Carrie wanted to change the environment that surrounded Frank on a daily basis, so she transferred him to another school. It was further away from where they lived, and it gave him a different view of going to school. He was around more multicultural kids, and his teachers actually cared about him. Yet, his past life continued to follow him around like a shadow, attempting to contaminate his new environment. In the midst of his high school years, Frank encountered one near brush with the law in an attempt to fit in with his fellow peers. His closest friend decided to steal merchandise from a store, and it wasn't the best friend who brought it to Frank's attention. Policemen stopped them, and for the simple fact that Frank was seen on camera walking around with him, they questioned him like he committed the crime as well. This was a defining moment because in the process of being interrogated for a crime he didn't commit, he transitioned from a follower to a leader. Ever since his encounter with the law he didn't orchestrate, he walked in fear of doing the wrong thing. He tiptoed in fear because he didn't want the law to define him in a bitter way. He didn't want to be labeled as someone he wasn't, with characteristics he didn't possess, with his mugshot as the cover to a story that wasn't true. He refused to let the law tattoo their own perception of him across his forehead. This small interrogation window within one's conscience is where millions of people fail to listen until it's too late. When you grow up without an identity of who you truly are, you tend to stop by the wrong lunch tables in an attempt to fit in and finally have an identity. The world doesn't tell you early on that the mainstream current your flesh wishes to fit into is a current that would take you further away from your sole purpose in life. It's the world versus your legacy. And when you differentiate between the two, you'll get a clear perspective on the priorities and sacrifices that must be made in order to stay the course. Otherwise, you'll veer off course later down the road of life. You can get tricked by trying to fit into the world, especially when you already have a disoriented legacy. If your family is generationally lost and you try to fit into the world, you'll become more lost and eventually lose everything you have. Some people change who they are for things that are worldly. However, if you know what's best for your family legacy, then trying to fit in would never cross your mind. Organizations fight for you to gain access to knowledge, but after you get access, there's another problem. You must be careful once you get a degree and break poverty, because merely fitting into mainstream isn't your purpose. You could actually graduate college and go backwards. Purpose is bigger than waking up, making money, and fitting into America. Make sure your degree is adjacent to your purpose, because college can steal from your family legacy as well. Research the numbers of what your degree will bring per year, because it takes a toll on people who cannot find a job afterwards. College isn't for everyone, because it gives you access to debt if it's not defined in your purpose. Frank was a C average student in high school. He didn't struggle in school because he didn't focus on the system as it presented itself. He didn't plan on attending college because school only bridged the gap to a few of his circumstances. School gave him access to an extra meal each day, social interaction, and core elements of his self-development. You can become distracted by the image of what the school system should and should not do for you, because it's impossible for academics to define who you truly are. If you were to transition your thought patterns and focus on fighting for the legacy of your family, you would march against the current of mainstream America.